Valentina Russo had perfected the art of being professionally untouchable. In 3 years, working as executive coordinator for Santoro Enterprises, she'd learned to navigate the dangerous waters of working for a man whose business empire existed in shades of gray that would make most people uncomfortable. Matteo Santoro didn't hide what he was. The legitimate shipping company occupied 20 floors of prime Boston real estate, employed 300 people, and generated enough revenue to satisfy any auditor's curiosity. The gleaming glass building in downtown Boston spoke of corporate success, quarterly earnings reports, and respectable business ventures. What happened in the warehouses after hours, what cargo moved through channels that didn't appear on manifests, what agreements were sealed with handshakes instead of contracts. That was the part Valentina had learned not to ask about. Not because she was naive. She'd grown up in Boston's North End, in a neighborhood where certain families commanded certain respect, where people learned early that some questions led to answers you couldn't unhear. Her father had worked construction for 40 years, had known which sites to avoid, which contractors had connections, which jobs came with strings attached that had nothing to do with building codes. She knew what Matteo was. Everyone did. The Santoro family had roots that went back 3 generations, connections that extended to Sicily and beyond, and a reputation for handling problems with decisive finality. But Matteo had never brought that world into her office, never asked her to do anything that would compromise her ethics or put her in legal jeopardy. The shipping company was clean, aggressively audited, meticulously documented, and profitable enough on its own merits that it didn't need creative accounting. Whatever else he did, he kept separate. She was good at her job, exceptional actually. She coordinated Matteo's calendar with military precision, anticipated his needs before he voiced them, managed his communications with diplomatic efficiency, and somehow kept his volatile temper from destroying business relationships when someone inevitably disappointed him. She'd seen him reduce grown men to stammering apologies with nothing more than a look, watched him negotiate contracts where the other party walked away thinking they'd won while Matteo secured exactly what he'd wanted from the start. Observed the way people straightened their spines when he entered a room, the way conversations shifted when he approached. He was brilliant, ruthless, and absolutely certain of his place in the world. At 38, he'd built an empire that existed in perfect balance between legitimate business and whatever darker ventures he conducted after hours. And in 3 years, he'd never once crossed the professional boundaries she'd established on her first day. In return, he paid her twice what she'd made at her previous corporate job, never questioned her decisions, respected her judgment, and had made it abundantly clear that anyone who made her uncomfortable would find themselves reassigned to significantly less pleasant positions. Like Marcus Chen from accounting, who'd made a comment about her appearance last year. Transferred to the night shift at their Newark warehouse within 48 hours. Or the vendor who'd asked her to dinner with a tone that suggested business wasn't his only interest. His company had lost their contract that same afternoon. People learned quickly. Valentina Russo was off limits. It was a good arrangement. Professional. Bounded by rules she'd established and he'd surprisingly respected. She arrived at 7:30 every morning, left at 6 unless there was an evening event, maintained perfect organization in his chaotic world, and never let anyone, including Matteo himself, forget that she was an employee, not a possession. It worked, because they both understood the lines. Until the roses arrived. They appeared on a Tuesday morning in late April, sitting on her desk in a clear vase wrapped with a generic ribbon. A dozen red roses, the kind you could buy at any grocery store for $19.99, their petals already starting to brown at the edges. The cellophane they'd been wrapped in was still visible beneath the vase, crinkled and cheap-looking. Valentina arrived at her usual 7:30 to find them waiting. She stared at them with the same enthusiasm she'd give a parking ticket. The card was tucked between the stems, white with gold-embossed lettering that tried too hard to look expensive. To Valentina, these reminded me of you. I hope they brighten your day. Perhaps we could have dinner this week. Blake Morrison. Of course. Blake worked in acquisitions, 3 floors down, 29 years old, Harvard MBA, expensive suits that his father probably paid for, and the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. He'd joined the company 6 months ago, transferred from their New York office, with a recommendation that praised his aggressive deal-making and persistent negotiation style. Within 2 weeks, he'd asked Valentina to coffee. She'd declined politely, citing workload. 3 weeks after that, he'd appeared at her desk with lunch from the expensive Italian place down the street. She'd thanked him, explained she had a working lunch scheduled, and recommended he try the restaurant with his team. A month ago, he'd sent her an email asking if she'd like to attend a charity gala as his date. She'd responded professionally. She didn't mix personal and professional relationships. Apparently, he still hadn't gotten the message. Valentina picked up her phone and texted Maya, her assistant. "Can you come to my office when you get in?" Maya appeared 15 minutes later, her eyes going immediately to the roses. "Oh, Blake? Who else? They're nice?" "They're grocery store roses that were probably cut 3 days ago and have been sitting in a warehouse since then." Valentina gestured at the browning edges. "Look at the petals. They'll be dead by tomorrow." "It's the thought that counts?" "The thought is that he ignored 3 explicit rejections and decided flowers would change my mind." Valentina sat down, logging into her computer. "Can you have them sent down to the 3rd floor break room? Tell everyone they're from management. Appreciation for Q1 performance." Maya's smile was knowing. "You're not even going to keep them for a day?" "Why would I reward persistence when I've been clear about my lack of interest?" Maya left with the roses, and Valentina returned her attention to Matteo's schedule. He had a conference call with Singapore at 9, lunch with the Harbor Commission at noon, and a meeting with their legal team at 3 to review new shipping contracts. She was compiling the Singapore briefing when she felt him. Matteo had that effect. His presence was tactile, like standing too close to a fire. She'd developed a 6th sense for his moods in 3 years. Right now, walking down the hallway toward her office, he was amused. That was unusual before 9 a.m. "Good morning," she said without looking up. "Singapore briefing is ready. Harbor Commission confirmed for noon. Legal meeting at 3 is in conference room A. Always 3 steps ahead." His voice was dark honey, that slight Italian accent that became more pronounced when he was relaxed. "Where are the roses?" Valentina's fingers paused on her keyboard. "What roses?" "The ones that were on your desk when I walked past 15 minutes ago." Matteo appeared in her doorway, coffee in hand, his dark eyes fixed on her with that unnerving focus. Grocery store quality, already dying, card with gold embossing trying to look expensive but just looking cheap. Of course he'd noticed. Matteo noticed everything. "They're in the 3rd floor break room," she said evenly. Employee appreciation gesture. His mouth curved slightly. Not quite a smile, but close. "You didn't want them. I don't encourage behavior I've already rejected." "Blake Morrison? Acquisitions?" It wasn't a question. Harvard MBA. Father's money, mother's connections, absolutely no idea how to read a room. Valentina looked up, meeting his eyes. "You've been keeping track of him?" "I keep track of everything in my building." Matteo leaned against her desk, too close for professional distance. "Especially men who don't understand what no means." "I can handle Blake Morrison." "I know you can." His gaze held hers. "But the roses were an insult." "They were grocery store flowers. That's hardly an insult worthy of your attention." "They were cheap, thoughtless, already dying when he had them delivered." Matteo's voice was quiet, but there was steel underneath. "You deserve better than that." The words hung between them, loaded with implications Valentina wasn't ready to examine. "It's just flowers, Matteo." "Nothing is just anything." He straightened, picking up his coffee. "Singapore in 25 minutes. I'll be in my office." He left, and Valentina sat staring at her computer screen, her heart beating faster than it should from a simple conversation about unwanted flowers. Blake appeared at her door at 8:15. His smile was confident, friendly, completely oblivious to the fact that she'd disposed of his flowers within 30 minutes. "Valentina, did you get my delivery this morning?" "I did. Blake, I appreciate the thought, but I wasn't sure if you were more of a roses or tulips person, so I went classic." He leaned against her doorframe. "Figured we could grab dinner this week? That new French place on Newberry Street just opened." "Blake." She kept her voice level. "I've told you before that I don't mix personal and professional relationships. That hasn't changed. Come on, it's just dinner." "It's not about conflict of interest. It's about personal preference." She met his eyes directly. "I'm not interested in having dinner with you, or coffee, or attending events together. I've tried to be polite, but I need to be clear. I'm not interested. Please don't send me gifts or ask me out again." His smile faltered. Something ugly flickered across his expression before he controlled it. "Got it. Message received." His tone was pleasant, but his eyes were hard. "Professional only. My mistake." He left, and Valentina let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. Day 2. Wednesday. Valentina arrived at 7:30 to find her desk transformed. Where the cheap grocery store roses had sat yesterday, briefly, before she'd gotten rid of them, there was now an arrangement that belonged in a magazine. 24 roses in shades of coral and cream, their blooms huge and perfectly formed, each petal like silk. These weren't standard long-stemmed roses from a florist. These were garden roses. David Austin, if she wasn't mistaken. The kind that came from specialty growers in England. The kind that required advance ordering and a budget that didn't flinch at 3-figure price tags. The vase was crystal, heavy and elegant, catching the morning light. No generic ribbon, no cheap cellophane, no trying too hard embossing. Just perfect flowers in a perfect vase with a single card tucked among the stems. Valentina picked it up with fingers that weren't quite steady. Someone who notices you. No name, no signature, just that single line in elegant script on heavy cardstock. She touched one of the petals carefully. It was velvet soft, perfect, and definitely not from any grocery store. These were the kind of roses that cost approximately $150 per stem. Holy shit. Valentina turned to find Maya standing in the doorway, eyes wide. "Where did those come from?" "I have no idea." "There's no card?" "Just this." Valentina showed her the cryptic message. Maya moved closer, breathing in the scent. "Those are David Austin roses. My sister got married last year and priced them for her bouquet. Do you know how much these cost?" "I'm aware." "Then you know whoever sent these spent probably $3,000 on this arrangement." Maya touched a petal gently. "Who would send you $3,000 worth of roses anonymously?" That was the question. Valentina sat down, staring at the arrangement. The flowers were perfect, not just expensive, but thoughtful. The coral and cream tones were exactly the colors she favored. She'd mentioned once, months ago, in a casual conversation, that she loved coral roses because they reminded her of her grandmother's garden. Someone had been paying attention. "Maybe it's a grateful client," Maya suggested. "We closed that Singapore deal yesterday. Clients send fruit baskets and wine, not $5,000 worth of specialty roses to my desk specifically." Maya grinned. "You have a secret admirer, a wealthy secret admirer." Valentina didn't respond. She had her suspicions, but they were too dangerous to voice. Blake appeared at her door 20 minutes later, his usual confidence faltering when he saw the new arrangement. His expression shifted through surprise, confusion, and something darker. "Those are..." He stopped, clearly trying to process. "Did someone send you flowers?" "Apparently." "Who?" I don't know. These are better than what I sent. He said it flatly, stating fact. Whoever sent these knows flowers. They're very generous, Valentina agreed carefully. Too generous for a simple thank you. Blake's eyes narrowed. This is someone making a statement. Blake, who would send you flowers like this? His tone had an edge now. I really don't know. But you're keeping them. His jaw tightened. You got rid of mine in 30 minutes. These you're keeping. Ms. Russo. Matteo's voice cut through the tension like a blade. He stood in the hallway, expression neutral, but his eyes were cold. The Singapore contracts need your review before this afternoon's follow-up call. Do you have time now? It wasn't really a question. Of course. Valentina stood. Blake, we'll talk later. She followed Matteo to his office, acutely aware of Blake's stare following them. Matteo closed the door with decisive finality. You're going to tell him no, he said without preamble. I already did, multiple times. Then be clearer. Matteo moved to his desk, his movements controlled but his jaw tight. Men like Blake Morrison don't understand subtle. I've been very direct. Have you? He turned to face her fully. Because I just watched him interrogate you about who sent the roses, as if he has any right to know about your personal life. He's frustrated. He's entitled. Matteo's voice went cold. And entitled men are dangerous when they don't get what they want. Valentina crossed her arms. Are we talking about Blake? Or you? The question landed between them with weight. Matteo's smile was sharp. I'm many things, Valentina, but I've never pretended you owe me anything. The difference between Blake Morrison and me is that I respect your boundaries even when I want to cross them. The roses on my desk. She kept her voice steady. You didn't know they were coming? Why would I send you roses anonymously? Because you notice things. Because you called Blake's flowers an insult. Because you know my schedule well enough to have them delivered before I arrive. She moved closer. Because you said I deserve better. Something flickered in his eyes. You do deserve better. From who? From everyone. He held her gaze. The Singapore call is at 2. We should review the contracts. It was a clear redirection, a wall going up. Valentina let it stand, but she filed the conversation away. The roses on her desk smelled like expensive perfume and secrets. Day 3, Thursday peonies. Not just any peonies, coral charm peonies, their blooms the size of softballs, layers of ruffled petals in shades that ranged from deep coral to the palest blush. They were spectacular, almost obscene in their abundance. The card, Day 3, still noticing. Valentina stood in her office staring at them, trying to calculate what this arrangement must have cost. Coral charm peonies were rare, highly sought after, blooming for a brief window in late spring. These looked like they'd been cut that morning, perfectly fresh. Maya appeared with coffee. Okay, this is getting serious. It's getting expensive, Valentina corrected. Any idea who's sending them? None. But that wasn't quite true. The timing was too perfect. The day after Blake's cheap roses, expensive David Austin roses appear. Then when Blake sees those and realizes he's being outclassed, even more expensive flowers arrive. It felt like a chess game. And there was only one person she knew who approached everything like a chess game. Blake stopped by again, this time without his usual confidence. He looked at the peonies, then at Valentina, his expression calculating. He's really going all out, he said. I don't know what you're talking about. Whoever your mystery admirer is. Blake's smile didn't reach his eyes. This has to be costing thousands. Blake, I need to work. Is it someone from the company? He leaned against her doorframe. Another exec, maybe? I don't discuss my personal life at work. But you're keeping the flowers in your office where everyone can see them. His tone sharpened. That's a statement, Valentina. The statement is that someone was kind enough to send me beautiful flowers. That's all. Right. Blake pushed off the doorframe. Well, whoever he is, he has good taste. I'll give him that. He left, and Valentina let out a breath. Her phone buzzed. A text from Matteo. My office. 5 minutes. She found him standing at his floor-to-ceiling window, hands in his pockets, looking out at Boston's skyline. His office was massive. Corner space, windows on 2 walls, furniture that cost more than some cars. You wanted to see me? Blake Morrison stopped by your office again. Matteo didn't turn from the window. 3rd time this week. He saw the flowers. Everyone's seen the flowers. Now he did turn, his dark eyes unreadable. You're the talk of the building, the mystery admirer sending increasingly expensive arrangements to the untouchable coordinator. Is that a problem? That depends. He moved closer. Do you want it to stop? The question hung between them. Valentina could say yes, could shut this down, could return to professional boundaries and safe distance. No, she said quietly. I don't want it to stop. Matteo's expression shifted, something heated moving behind his eyes. Good, because the roses were just the beginning. It is you. I didn't say that. You just implied it. I implied that whoever's sending them isn't going to stop until you tell them to. He was close now, close enough that she could smell his cologne. And since you haven't told them to stop, this is crossing boundaries, Valentina said, but her voice lacked conviction. We crossed boundaries 2 years ago. His hand came up, not touching her but close enough that she felt the heat. When you started anticipating my needs before I voiced them. When I started noticing what you drink, how you think, what makes you smile. His voice dropped. When I started giving a damn about men like Blake Morrison sending you dying flowers and thinking it was acceptable. Matteo, the peonies will last about 5 days if you keep the water fresh. He stepped back, giving her space. Contract review at 2. Don't be late. He returned to his desk, effectively dismissing her. Valentina fled to her office on unsteady legs. The peonies sat on her desk, spectacular and expensive, and absolutely not a coincidence. Days 4 through 7. Thursday afternoon, white garden roses with the faintest blush of pink at their centers. Card. Day 4. Quality over quantity. Friday morning, French tulips in apricot and cream, their petals perfectly formed. Card. Day 5. Consistency matters. Saturday, Valentina came in to catch up on quarterly reports and found ranunculus in shades of coral, their layers of paper-thin petals creating impossible texture. Card. Day 6. Even weekends. Monday morning, 1 week after Blake's grocery store roses. Romantic antique roses in shades of mauve and ivory, so perfect they looked artificial. The card was different this time. 1 week. You deserve flowers that won't die in a day. Someone who notices the difference. Valentina stood in her office, surrounded by a week's worth of the most beautiful flowers she'd ever seen, and made a decision. She walked across the hall and knocked on Matteo's door. Come in. He was working on his laptop, suit jacket draped over his chair, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms that suggested he didn't spend all his time behind a desk. He looked up when she entered. Is it you? She asked directly. He leaned back, studying her with that unnerving focus. Is what me? The flowers, every morning for a week. Is it you? Why would I send you flowers anonymously? Because you make statements. Because you noticed when I complained about Blake's roses. Because you know my schedule well enough to have them delivered before I arrive. She moved closer to his desk. Because you said someone was making a statement about everyone else's gestures being insulting by comparison, And you sounded like you understood exactly what statement they were making. Interesting theory. Is it true? Would it matter if it was? Yes, she said honestly. It would matter a lot. Matteo stood, moving around his desk with predatory grace. Why? Because we have rules. Professional boundaries. You respected those boundaries for 3 years. I'm still respecting them. He stopped just close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. I haven't asked you to dinner. Haven't made any inappropriate advances. Haven't created any situation that would make your job uncomfortable. You're sending me thousands of dollars worth of flowers every single day. I didn't say it was me. But it is. His smile was slow and dangerous. You're very confident about that. Am I wrong? Matteo reached out, his fingers brushing a strand of hair away from her face. What do you want me to say, Valentina? The truth. The truth is that you deserve flowers that don't die in a day. You deserve someone who notices the difference between grocery store roses and David Austin gardens. You deserve consistency, not just persistence. His thumb traced her cheekbone. You deserve to be seen. Her breath caught. Matteo. But you're right about the boundaries. You set them. I respected them. He stepped back, giving her space she suddenly didn't want. If you want to know who's sending the flowers, ask them to sign the card. He returned to his desk, effectively dismissing her, leaving Valentina standing in his office with her heart racing and more questions than answers. The next morning brought pink peonies with a card that made Valentina's chest tight. Ask me to stop, and I will. She stared at the message for a long time. She could end this. One conversation, one clear statement, and the flowers would stop. The tension would ease. Things would go back to professional and safe. She left the card on her desk without responding. Blake had started spending more time near her office, coincidentally appearing when she got coffee, finding reasons to stop by with questions that could have been emails. His smile was pleasant, but there was something harder underneath now. Meanwhile, the flowers continued their daily arrival with clockwork precision. Day 9. Garden roses in a shade called Patience, their blooms enormous and perfectly formed. The card read simply, Day 9. Day 10. Sweet peas in coral and cream, their delicate blooms filling her office with fragrance. Day 10. Someone remembers your grandmother's garden. Valentina's breath had caught at that one. She'd mentioned her grandmother's garden exactly once, months ago, in a casual conversation with Maya about childhood memories. Someone had been listening. Really listening. By day 12, her office looked like a luxury flower shop. Each arrangement was perfectly maintained, the previous day's flowers still fresh, creating a garden that drew constant attention from everyone who passed her door. This is getting ridiculous, Maya said that morning, staring at the latest delivery, French chocolate cosmos flowers. Do you have any idea who's sending these? None. Liar. Maya's smile was knowing. You know exactly who it is. You're just not ready to admit it. Valentina didn't respond, because Maya was right. Blake had stopped being subtle. On day 13, he sent chocolates. By the next morning, there was an arrangement of actual chocolate cosmos flowers. Rare, expensive, with a note. The real thing is always better than imitation. Day 14 brought cherry blossom branches so perfect, they looked artificial. 2 weeks. Still here. Blake tried again that afternoon with a teddy bear and more grocery store roses. The next morning's delivery was a massive arrangement of heirloom roses in every shade of coral imaginable, so stunning that people from other floors came to see it. The card read, Quality over quantity. Always. By day 15, Blake's jaw was tight with frustration every time he saw Valentina's office. The contrast was impossible to miss. His simple, generic gestures versus the sophisticated, expensive arrangements that appeared like clockwork every morning. "This is getting out of hand," he said Friday afternoon, standing in her doorway with his arms crossed. "Whoever this guy is, he's trying too hard." Valentina looked up from her laptop. "I think he's trying exactly as hard as he intends to. It's manipulative. It's thoughtful. You don't even know who it is." "No," she agreed. "But I know he pays attention. He notices what I like. He's consistent." She met Blake's eyes directly. "Can you say the same?" Blake's face flushed. "I've been trying." "You've been persistent. That's not the same thing as paying attention." She kept her voice gentle but firm. "Persistence is trying until you get what you want. Consistency is showing up whether you get it or not." "That's just semantics." "No. It's the difference between wanting something and deserving someone." Blake stared at her for a long moment, something ugly flickering across his expression. Then he turned and walked away without another word. Valentina watched him go, feeling the weight of Matteo's attention from his office across the hall. When she glanced over, he was standing at his window, coffee in hand, watching Blake's retreat with an expression of cool satisfaction. Their eyes met through the glass. He raised his cup slightly, an acknowledgement, maybe a toast, before turning back to his desk. Week 3. The pattern deepens. Day 16 brought dahlias in shades of coral and burgundy, their blooms architectural and perfect. Day 17. Lisianthus that looked like roses but weren't, their petals impossibly delicate. Day 18. A mix of garden roses and peonies, the arrangement so spectacular that the building's CEO stopped by Valentina's office just to see it. "Quite an admirer you have," he'd said, his tone carefully neutral. "Someone with excellent taste and unlimited budget." Valentina had smiled politely and returned to work, but she'd felt Matteo's attention from across the hall like a physical touch. By day 19, the entire office knew. The whispers had shifted from curious to knowing. Everyone understood what was happening, even if no one said it outright. Valentina Russo, the untouchable coordinator, had an admirer. A wealthy, persistent, sophisticated admirer who spent thousands of dollars on flowers and somehow knew exactly what she liked. And Blake Morrison, who'd started this entire thing with his cheap grocery store roses, was looking progressively more frustrated with each passing day. On day 20, he cornered her in the break room. The space was empty, just the two of them and the hum of the coffee maker. Blake positioned himself between her and the door. "We need to talk," he said. Valentina set down her coffee cup carefully. "About what?" "About this situation. The flowers. Whatever game you're playing." "I'm not playing any games, Blake. You're stringing along whoever's sending these ridiculous arrangements, and you're making me look like an idiot." His voice rose slightly. "I gave you flowers first. I showed interest first. And you're acting like I don't exist while accepting thousands of dollars in gifts from some mystery guy." "Blake." Valentina kept her voice level, despite the anger rising in her chest. "I never asked you to send me anything. I never encouraged you. I explicitly told you I wasn't interested. Before all this started, even before, I was clear from the beginning." She met his eyes directly. "Your feelings are not my responsibility, Blake. Neither is your ego." His expression darkened. "You think you're better than me because some rich guy is showering you with expensive flowers? You're just an assistant, Valentina. Don't forget that. I think we're done here." She moved toward the door. Blake's hand shot out, closing around her arm hard enough to hurt. "I'm talking to you." "Let go." Her voice went cold. "Now." "Or what? You'll tell your mystery admirer? Your boss?" His grip tightened. "You think anyone cares about some assistant getting flowers? You think that makes you special?" The break room door opened. Matteo stood in the doorway, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Morrison." His voice was quiet. "Deadly. I suggest you remove your hand before I remove it for you. Blake dropped her arm like it had burned him. Mr. Santoro, you were just leaving. Matteo moved into the room, and Blake backed up instinctively. Permanently. Security will escort you to collect your things. You have 30 minutes. You can't fire me for... I can fire you for putting your hands on my executive coordinator without her consent. I can fire you for creating a hostile work environment. I can fire you for harassment. Matteo's smile was sharp. I can fire you for any reason I choose, or no reason at all. This is an at-will state, Morrison. I suggest you don't test how far my generosity extends. Blake looked at Valentina, then back at Matteo. Whatever he saw in Matteo's expression made his face go pale. This is because of her, isn't it? Blake's laugh was ugly. All of it. The flowers, the attention, this whole thing. You're the one sending them. You're the mystery admirer. Matteo's expression didn't change. 30 minutes. Starting now. Blake left, his footsteps echoing in the hallway. Around them, employees who'd been pretending not to listen suddenly became very interested in their coffee cups. Valentina stood frozen, her arm still tingling where Blake had grabbed her. Are you all right? Matteo asked quietly. I'm fine. You're shaking. She was. She looked down at her hands, seeing the tremor she couldn't control. He grabbed me. I saw. Something dangerous flickered in Matteo's eyes. If he'd held on any longer, you'd be planning his funeral instead of his firing. That's excessive. That's proportional. He moved closer, his hand coming up to her arm, fingers gentle where Blake's had been harsh. No one touches you like that. Ever. You're touching me. You're not pulling away. She wasn't. She was standing in the break room letting her boss, her Mafia boss, run his fingers over her arm where another man had grabbed her, and she wasn't pulling away. It was you, she said quietly. The flowers. All of it. Yes. The simple admission hung between them. Why? Because Blake Morrison gave you dying grocery store roses and called it a grand gesture. His hand slid down to her wrist, his thumb finding her pulse. Because you deserve better than that. Better than him. Better than anyone who can't see the difference between effort and quality. You sent me flowers every morning for 3 weeks. And I'll keep sending them until you tell me to stop. His grip tightened slightly. Because you deserve to start your day seeing something beautiful. Because you work too hard, smile too little, and nobody's made you feel seen in a long time. How do you know that? Because I've been watching you for 3 years. His voice was low, intense. I notice everything about you, Valentina. The way you bite your lip when you're concentrating. How you take your coffee black but you actually hate it. You just don't want to deal with explaining your order. The fact that you're left-handed but you trained yourself to use a mouse right-handed because someone once told you it was unprofessional. You have a scar on your right hand shaped like a crescent moon, probably from childhood, and you haven't been happy in a very long time. Her heart was hammering. That doesn't give you the right. I'm not claiming rights. I'm stating facts. His thumb traced the scar he'd mentioned. You don't want his gifts. You don't want his attention. So stop pretending this is about choice and admit it's about control. And if I want control, then take it. He released her wrist, stepped back. The flowers continue tomorrow, day 21, and the day after that, and the day after that, until you tell me to stop. And if I don't tell you to stop? His smile was slow and devastating. Then we'll see what happens when a month is up. He left before she could respond, leaving Valentina standing in the break room trying to remember how to breathe normally. Her phone buzzed, a text from Maya. Blake is being escorted out by security. Everyone's talking. Are you okay? She texted back, I'm fine. Can you handle my calls for the next hour? Of course. Boss wants to see you when you're ready." Valentina returned to her office on unsteady legs. The flowers from that morning, day 20, a spectacular arrangement of Juliet roses, sat on her desk like a promise. Or a threat. She wasn't sure which. The flowers continued. Day 21. Pink peonies so perfect they looked painted. Card. 3 weeks. Still noticing you. Day 22. The promised Juliet roses, the ones that cost $150 per stem. 24 of them, filling her office with their incredible fragrance. The card read, "These reminded me of you, someone who understands quality." It was a direct callback to Blake's original card. The difference was impossible to miss. By day 23, everyone in the building knew. Not just about the flowers, but about who was sending them. The way Matteo had defended her in the break room, the way he'd fired Blake without hesitation, the way he looked at her when he thought no one was watching. Valentina had become untouchable in a new way, not just because she worked for Matteo Santoro, because she belonged to him. The whispers followed her through the building, in the elevator, in the break room, in the bathroom where women who'd never spoken to her before suddenly wanted to ask about the flowers. "Are you and Mr. Santoro... How long has this been going on? Does this mean you're together?" Valentina maintained professional distance, refused to confirm or deny, and focused on her work. But she couldn't ignore the shift. The way people looked at her now, with wariness, with respect, with the understanding that she was no longer just the coordinator. Day 24 brought orchids in coral and cream, their blooms exotic and perfect. Day 25 was a Friday. Valentina had spent that week in a strange limbo, the flowers arriving every morning, Matteo maintaining professional distance at work, while his eyes promised something else entirely. They hadn't discussed the break room confrontation, hadn't addressed his admission that he'd been sending the flowers, hadn't talked about what any of it meant. But the tension hummed between them like a live wire. Friday evening, Valentina was packing up her things when her phone buzzed. A text from Matteo. "Dinner. My place. 7 o'clock. Not a request." She should have said no. Should have maintained those boundaries she'd worked so hard to establish. Instead, she texted back, "What time should I be ready?" His response was immediate. "I'll send a car at 6:30. Valentina stared at her phone for a long moment, then closed her laptop and went home to change. She had no idea what she was walking into. But she was done pretending she didn't want it. Friday night, the shift. The car arrived at 6:30 exactly, sleek, black, with a driver who opened the door without a word. Valentina had changed 3 times before settling on a navy dress that was elegant without trying too hard, professional enough to maintain some illusion of boundaries. Matteo's building was in the north end, all old brick and new money. The penthouse elevator required a key, which the driver provided before disappearing. The doors opened directly into Matteo's apartment. Exposed brick, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor, furniture that managed to be both comfortable and expensive. But there were also books, actual physical books lining built-in shelves, their spines worn like they'd been read multiple times, and photographs scattered on surfaces, showing people who had to be family. "You're early," Matteo said, emerging from what had to be the kitchen. He'd changed, too. Dark slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, no tie. Casual in a way she'd never seen him. "Your driver was efficient. I pay him to be." He moved closer. "You look beautiful." "You said dinner. I dressed for dinner." "You dressed to keep me at a distance." His smile was knowing. "It won't work." Confident. Honest. He gestured toward the kitchen. "Come. Everything's almost ready." She followed him into a space clearly designed for someone who actually cooked. Matteo moved around it with easy familiarity, checking something in the oven, stirring a pot on the stove. "You cook," she said, unable to hide her surprise. "My mother would disown me if I didn't." He plated what looked like homemade pasta with a sauce that smelled incredible. Sit. They ate at the island, close enough that his knee pressed against hers. The food was excellent. Simple but perfectly executed. They talked about work, about the Singapore contracts, about everything except the flowers, or what was happening between them. Until Mateo set down his fork and looked at her directly. 25 days, he said quietly. Every morning I made sure you saw something beautiful before your day started. Every morning, I chose flowers that would make you smile, that would show you someone was paying attention. Why? Because you deserve it. He reached across, took her hand. Blake Morrison gave you dying grocery store roses once because he wanted something from you. I've sent you fresh roses every morning for almost a month because you're worth it. Not because I want something. Because you deserve to be seen. Valentina's eyes stung with unexpected tears. That's not fair. What's not fair? Saying it like that, making it sound so simple. It is simple. He stood, pulling her up with him. I see you, Valentina. I've seen you for 3 years, and I'm done pretending I don't want you. He kissed her then, his hands framing her face, his mouth claiming hers with absolute certainty. It wasn't asking permission. It was 3 years of tension finally breaking into something real. When he pulled back, they were both breathing hard. Tell me to stop, he said against her lips. She shook her head. Don't stop. Good. He kissed her again, deeper this time. Because I'm not done. Not even close. He lifted her, her legs wrapping around his waist, and carried her toward the bedroom. The flowers would arrive tomorrow. Day 26, and the day after that, and the day after that. Because some things, once started, couldn't be stopped. And Valentina had stopped wanting to. Valentina woke in Mateo's bed to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and the scent of coffee. She was sore in the best way, her body bearing evidence of the night before. Marks on her neck and collarbone that she'd have to cover with makeup. The pleasant ache between her thighs. The warmth of knowing exactly who she belonged to now. Mateo appeared in the doorway wearing nothing but sleep pants, holding 2 coffee cups. You're awake. Barely. She sat up, pulling the sheet with her. What time is it? 8:30. He handed her a cup, sat on the edge of the bed. I made breakfast. Thought we could eat, then I'd drive you home to change. I have to work today. I know, so do I. His hand came up, fingers tracing the marks on her neck with satisfaction. But first breakfast, and a conversation about what happens next. They ate on his terrace overlooking the harbor. Fresh fruit, pastries from the bakery down the street, more coffee than was probably healthy. Mateo watched her with an intensity that made her skin warm. What? She finally asked. I'm trying to figure out if you're going to run. Run where? Back to professional boundaries, safe distance, pretending last night didn't happen. His hand found hers across the table. Tell me you're not going to do that. Valentina looked at him. This dangerous, complicated man who'd sent her flowers every morning for almost a month just to make her smile. Who'd fired someone for grabbing her arm. Who'd admitted he'd been watching her for 3 years. I'm not going to run, she said quietly. But we need to talk about how this works. At the office, with your family, with... It works, however we want it to work. He pulled her into his lap, his arms wrapping around her waist. At the office, you're still my coordinator. Nothing changes professionally except everyone now knows you're under my protection in every sense. And with your family? Sunday dinner, tomorrow. My mother's been asking when I'm going to bring someone home for the past 5 years. His smile was sharp. She's going to love you. You're very confident about that. My mother is terrifying and brilliant and has excellent taste. He kissed her neck, right over one of the marks he'd left. She'll recognize quality when she sees it. Is that what I am? Quality? You're everything. He turned her to face him, his expression serious. I meant what I said last night. I see you, Valentina. All of you. And I'm not letting you go. That's very possessive. That's very honest. His hand slid into her hair. Can you handle that? She thought about 3 years of professional distance, about boundaries she'd established and maintained religiously, about the safety of keeping her heart locked away behind competence and efficiency. Then she thought about 26 mornings of perfect flowers, about someone noticing what no one else saw, about finally being seen. Yes, she whispered. I can handle that. He kissed her until she forgot about work, about schedules, about everything except the feel of his hands and the certainty in his touch. When he finally let her up for air, his smile was devastating. Good. Because the flowers don't stop just because you're in my bed. That seems excessive. That's the point. Day 27 through 30. Monday morning, Valentina walked into the office wearing a scarf to cover the marks Matteo had left. She arrived at 7:30 to find Day 27's delivery waiting, garden roses in shades of pink and coral, with a card that read, "Someone who wakes up beautiful deserves beautiful mornings." Maya took one look at her and grinned. So, Friday night went well. I'm not discussing my personal life. You're wearing a scarf in 70-degree weather and you have that look. What look? The I got thoroughly loved look. Maya's smile widened. Also, the entire building knows you left with Mr. Santoro Friday night and didn't come back until this morning. So, Valentina felt heat creep up her neck. I hate gossip. Then you're in the wrong office. Maya gestured at the flowers. Day 27. He's really committed to this, isn't he? Apparently. The day passed in a blur of knowing looks and whispered conversations. People who'd never paid attention to her before suddenly found reasons to stop by her office. The women wanted details. The men wanted to know if it was serious. Matteo maintained professional distance at work, but his eyes promised things that made her blush every time she caught him watching. Day 28 brought orchids and peonies mixed together, exotic and romantic. The card. 4 weeks tomorrow. Just getting started. Day 29. A massive arrangement of David Austin roses in every shade from deep coral to palest blush. Someone who deserves consistency. Tuesday afternoon, day 29, Matteo appeared in her office doorway. Pack up, we're leaving early. I have the quarterly reports to finish. They can wait until tomorrow. He moved into her office, his hand settling on the small of her back. We have a reservation at 7. You need time to get ready. A reservation where? That restaurant on Newbury Street Blake kept trying to take you to. His smile was sharp. I made sure to book the best table. The one visible from the entire dining room. You're making a statement. I'm making several. He pulled her close enough that she could feel his body heat. You're mine, Valentina. Everyone in this building knows it. By tomorrow, everyone in our social circles will know it too. That's very territorial. That's very accurate. He kissed her, brief but possessive, not caring that they were in her office where anyone could see. 7 o'clock, wear that green dress, the one that makes me forget how to think. He left, and Valentina sat down heavily, her heart racing. Tomorrow was day 30, 1 full month of flowers. 1 month of Matteo Santoro systematically dismantling every boundary she'd established and replacing them with something infinitely more dangerous. Certainty, commitment, possession. And the terrifying part was how much she wanted it. Day 30, the completion. Wednesday morning, exactly 1 month after Blake's cheap grocery store roses had started everything, Valentina walked into her office to find the most spectacular arrangement yet. Garden roses in every shade of coral, cream, and blush. Peonies in full bloom. Ranunculus and sweet peas. delicate lisianthus and dramatic dahlias. It was a garden in a vase, abundant and perfect, and clearly the culmination of 30 days of increasingly elaborate gestures. The card was longer this time. 30 days. Every morning, I made sure you saw something beautiful before your day started. Every morning, I chose flowers that would make you smile, that would show you someone was paying attention to the details everyone else misses. Blake Morrison gave you dying grocery store roses once because he wanted something from you. I've sent you fresh roses every morning for a month because you deserve them. Not because I want something, though I want everything, but because you're worth it. This isn't the end. This is just the beginning. Matteo. Valentina stood holding the card, her eyes stinging with unexpected tears. 30 days. Every single morning without fail. Even when they'd spent nights together, even when she'd been at his place, he'd made sure the flowers were delivered to her office so everyone would see. So she would start her workday, knowing someone cared about those details. Maya appeared in the doorway, took one look at the arrangement and Valentina's expression, and smiled softly. 30 days. 30 days, Valentina agreed. That's commitment. That's Matteo. Her phone buzzed. A text. Lunch, noon, don't argue. She smiled, typed back. Wouldn't dream of it. Sunday dinner, meeting the family. Sunday arrived with the inevitability of a storm Valentina had been watching build all week. She'd spent Saturday helping Matteo with some business that she'd learned not to ask about. Paperwork that needed reviewing, contracts that required her analytical eye but not her questions. Then the evening at his place, cooking dinner together in his kitchen, while he told her stories about growing up in the North End. Then waking up in his bed to find a single perfect Juliet rose on the pillow next to her. Day 32, he'd said, watching her discover it with sleepy eyes. Told you they wouldn't stop. You're insane, she'd murmured, but she'd smiled as she'd said it. I'm consistent. There's a difference. Now she stood in front of her closet, trying to figure out what one wore to meet the family of a Mafia boss who'd been sending her flowers for a month and had very publicly claimed her as his. She'd tried on 4 different dresses before settling on burgundy, elegant without being too formal, respectful without being boring, sophisticated enough to suggest she took this seriously. She paired it with simple jewelry, minimal makeup, and reminded herself that she'd faced down difficult clients and demanding executives for years. How much harder could one Italian family be? Matteo picked her up at 5:30, looking unfairly good in dark jeans and a black sweater that made him look younger, less intimidating, more approachable. Nervous? He asked as they drove toward his mother's house. Terrified. Don't be. They're going to love you. His hand found her thigh, warm and grounding. My mother's been dying to meet you since I mentioned you 3 years ago. You mentioned me 3 years ago? I told her I'd hired someone brilliant who was too smart to put up with my shit and looked at me like I was a person instead of a position. His smile was soft. She's been waiting to meet you ever since. What did you tell her about the flowers? Everything. He glanced at her, his expression warm. That I'd been watching you for years. That some entitled asshole sent you dying roses. That I decided to show you what you deserve. That it took me 30 days to convince you to give this a chance. You didn't have to convince me. You just had to stop being my boss long enough for me to admit I wanted you too. Semantics. His hand tightened on her thigh. We're here. The house was warm brick and glowing windows, the kind of place that looked like it had been filled with laughter and loud voices for generations. Matteo led her inside without knocking, and immediately they were engulfed in chaos. Dante! Finally! A woman who had to be his mother appeared from the kitchen, small and elegant with dark hair threaded with silver, sharp eyes that missed nothing, and a smile that was both welcoming and assessing. And you brought her. Mama, this is Valentina. Valentina, my mother, Bianca. The one from work. Bianca's smile widened as she looked Valentina over with obvious approval. The one you won't stop talking about. Mama. What? You call me 3 times a week to tell me about the flowers you're sending, about how she looked at you when you admitted it was you, about how patient you're being while she adjusts to this. She pulled Valentina into a hug that smelled like garlic and wine and something baking. Welcome, Bella. Come, meet everyone before they eat everything and leave nothing for dinner. The dining room was chaos incarnate. At least 15 people crowded around a table that groaned under the weight of food. Platters of pasta, bowls of sauce, fresh bread, salads, roasted vegetables, and at least 3 different meat dishes. Everyone was talking over each other in a mix of English and Italian, gesturing with hands and wine glasses, laughing at inside jokes. Matteo introduced her methodically. His father Antonio, older version of Matteo, with the same dark eyes and commanding presence, but softer around the edges. His 2 brothers, Marco, 35 and serious, a lawyer who handled the family's legitimate contracts, and Luca, 32 and charming, who ran their restaurant investments. Their wives, both warm and welcoming. His sister Sophia, 28 and sharp-eyed, who looked Valentina over like she was calculating something important. And his grandmother, Nonna Rosa, who had to be in her 80s but looked like she could still command a room. She's too skinny, Nonna announced in heavily accented English, looking Valentina up and down. You don't feed her enough, Matteo. I'm working on it, Nonna. Work harder. A man who can't feed his woman is not worth having. But Nonna's eyes were twinkling as she said it. Dinner was loud and overwhelming, and somehow exactly right. They passed dishes, argued about politics, told embarrassing stories about each other's childhoods. Bianca told a story about Matteo at age 8, trying to negotiate with the ice cream truck driver for a bulk discount. His brothers contributed several tales about his high school years that made Valentina laugh until her sides hurt. Sophia asked pointed questions about Valentina's background, her education, her family. Not hostile, but thorough, testing to see if she was worthy of her brother. Through it all, Matteo's hand stayed on her knee under the table, steady and grounding. He didn't try to control the conversation or protect her from his family's scrutiny. He just let her be herself, jumping in only when his brothers got too obnoxious or when someone needed a story clarified. After dinner, when the men had retreated to the living room with espresso and grappa, Bianca cornered Valentina in the kitchen. So, Bianca said, handing her a dish to dry, are you going to break my son's heart? The directness caught Valentina off guard. What? Matteo. Bianca's expression was serious now. He's my oldest. Stubborn, difficult, too smart for his own good sometimes. But he has a good heart. And he's given it to you. We've only been together a few weeks. He's been in love with you for 3 years. Bianca said it matter-of-factly. He just finally convinced you to admit you feel the same. So I'm asking, are you going to break his heart? Valentina thought about 32 days of flowers, about someone noticing what no one else saw, about feeling seen for the first time in her life. No, she said quietly. I'm not going to break his heart. Bianca's smile was warm. Good. Then your family, which means Sunday dinners are mandatory, holidays are non-negotiable, and you'll tell me immediately if he does anything stupid. I can do that. Excellent. Bianca hugged her again. Welcome home, Valentina. When Matteo found her 20 minutes later, his expression was carefully neutral. Mama didn't scare you off? She told me Sunday dinners are mandatory. And I said okay. His smile was slow and devastating. Good. Because I wasn't giving you a choice anyway. They left 2 hours later, stuffed with food and overwhelmed by Santoro family energy. In the car, Matteo pulled her close. You survived, he said. Your mother already loves me. I told you she would. He kissed her temple. And Nonna gave you her approval, which is harder to get than the Pope's blessing. She said I'm too skinny. She says that about everyone. It means she's decided to feed you every Sunday until you meet her standards. His hand found hers. Welcome to the family, Bella. Valentina leaned against him, feeling the certainty in his touch, the warmth of his family's acceptance, the promise of Sunday dinners and holidays, and a future she'd stopped trying to fight. The flowers, she said softly. You're really not going to stop, are you? Not until the day I die. He tilted her face up to his. You deserve fresh roses every morning, Valentina. You deserve to walk into your office and know someone's paying attention, and I'm going to make sure you never forget that. That's insane. That's love. He kissed her. Get used to it. Epilogue, 6 months later. Day 184 brought a single perfect Juliet rose with a card that read, Still noticing you. Valentina had moved into Matteo's penthouse 3 months ago. Her old apartment sat empty, waiting for her to decide what to do with it. But she spent every night in Matteo's bed, every morning waking to his hands and his mouth and the certainty of being wanted. The flowers never stopped. Sometimes elaborate arrangements that filled her office. Sometimes a single perfect stem. But always, every single morning, there were flowers. Blake Morrison had taken a job in Los Angeles. Rumor was he'd tried to find work in New York, Boston, and Chicago, and been rejected from every company he'd applied to. Valentina didn't ask what strings Matteo had pulled. Some questions were better left unanswered. Sunday dinners at Bianca's had become routine. Nonna Rosa had stopped commenting on Valentina's weight and started teaching her family recipes, which everyone agreed was the highest form of approval. Sophia had become a friend. Marco and Luca treated her like a sister. The office gossip had died down after the first month. Now everyone simply accepted. Valentina Russo and Matteo Santoro were together. She still coordinated his calendar, still managed his communications, still ran the legitimate business with ruthless efficiency. But she also left with him every night, attended events on his arm, wore marks on her skin that everyone pretended not to notice. On day 200, Matteo filled the entire executive floor with roses. Every office, every desk, every surface covered in coral and cream blooms. The card on her desk was simple. Sometimes consistency deserves a grand gesture. By day 300, everyone in Boston's Italian community understood. Valentina Russo was untouchable. Not because she worked for Matteo Santoro. Because she belonged to him. And he'd spent 300 days making sure everyone knew exactly how valuable she was. The flowers never stopped. Even after the ring appeared on her finger, a massive emerald surrounded by diamonds. His grandmother's ring that Bianca had presented to her with tears in her eyes. Even after his last name replaced hers in a ceremony that was half Catholic Mass, half Sicilian tradition, and completely overwhelming. Even after she was officially, legally, irrevocably his. Every morning, there were fresh roses on her desk. You know you don't have to keep doing this, she said one morning, 6 months after their wedding, staring at yet another perfect arrangement. Matteo appeared behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. I know I don't have to. Then why? Because Blake Morrison gave you dying grocery store roses once, because he wanted something from you. He turned her to face him, his dark eyes serious. I send you fresh roses every morning because I love you. Because you deserve to walk into your office every single day and know that someone is paying attention. That someone sees you. That someone loves you enough to never let you forget it. It's been a year. And it'll be 50 more if I have my way. He kissed her, slow and deep. This is who I am, Valentina. Consistent, committed, completely yours. She looked at this man, her husband, her love, her certainty, and felt her heart expand with something that felt like coming home. I love you, she whispered. I know. His smile was soft. I've known for 3 years. I'm just glad you finally caught up. The flowers arrived the next morning, as they had for 365 days, as they would for the rest of their lives, because some men didn't do anything halfway. Some gestures weren't temporary, and some women were worth fresh roses every single morning, forever. Blake Morrison had given her dying roses once because he wanted something. Matteo Santoro sent her fresh roses every morning for a month, and then never stopped, because she deserved them. That was the difference between persistence and consistency, between wanting something and deserving someone, between a gesture and a commitment. And Valentina had learned to recognize quality when she saw it.